What's going on, guys? Bruce Matz here, your host show, Metric Scout Fantasy Football. And yesterday, during my buy low wide receiver video, I said I was going to come back with some more wide receivers to talk about after I got more info from the Monday night games. Well, now it's time to go over this. I have more wide receivers for you to trade for. These wide receivers are more functional for your basic redraft leagues, so pretty much everybody can use this information to try and make trades. So pretty much I took weeks 1 and 2, along with the games from the Monday night games, and I went over their air yards to find guys who are getting workload, but was not productive over the last 2 weeks. Here I took wide receivers with 160 or more air yards who had less than 140 yards receiving or 69 receiving yards per game. The 69-yard mark's funny, so we're going to keep that in there. But I was able to get a decent sample with those Monday night games included. So let's take a look at these. Again, a lot of these guys you're going to have to trade for because they're on rosters in redraft leagues. If they're on the waiver wire, you're going to want to try and get them. There's one on here that is a stretch, more for deeper leagues. But it's good to look at the process either way if they're not for your format of fantasy. Again, fantasy gamers from all walks of life come to this channel, from deep dynasty to deep redraft to basic redraft. So I'm trying to help everybody out at once by just going over the process. This is also from the spreadsheet, so it doesn't mean I agree with these, doesn't mean these are actual takes. This is a spreadsheet take, if you want to say that. So we're just going off the numbers here. First wide receiver today, Chris Olave. After 2 weeks, he is the wide receiver 43 with 20.1 PPR fantasy points. In the last 2 weeks, 19.8% target share, 16 targets, 372 air yards. I think he's leading the league in air yards. He had over 300 last week. Jameis Winston was dropping back, and he was like Chris Olave somewhere out there and just chucking it deep to him. What we like about that is that if he connects on 1 or 2 of those deep targets, that's a huge week. That's a huge week. So he's an upside play. 39% share of the air yards, 74 air yards plus yak. So what's important about that stat? A lot of people use that for like DFS, waiver wire, and stuff like that. What that tells us is that this player's getting workload. He's getting targets downfield or a large amount of targets. That's equating to a lot of air yards, and he's getting yards after the catch, so he's getting you some boom once he gets the ball in his hands, and he's also catching the ball because you can't get yak without catching the ball. So there's a lot to take in. Usually the higher air yards plus the yak you get, the more potential you got. When you filter sort those players, you get the top tier guys on that list. If that's something you're interested in, if you want me to go over those numbers for the whole league or the top tier guys so you know what that looks like, or for any of these, I can run a report like that and go over that real quick on a video. Just drop that in the comments. That just came to me. I'm not trying to flesh for comments. Just let me know if that's something you're into, if that's something the audience likes. I will do that if I get a few comments that are saying, hey, that's kind of cool. Let me see. I want to see the correlations. I may run that every couple weeks or so. Next wide receiver is Terry McLaurin. And Washington's been funny here. Curtis Samuel's been balling out. Samuel's a buy, of course. We also have Jahan Dotson doing things. He's currently the wide receiver 31 with 26 PPR fantasy points, a 12.5% target share. The targets are not going around as heavy to everybody. Things are spreading out. 12 targets in 2 games, so 6 a game here. 183 air yards, though, and a 25% share of the air yards. So he's getting targets downfield. Of course, he's a 4-3 guy, so he's going to get those deeper targets. Carson Wentz, if you look at the air yards, I'm just guessing here, but I'm going to go back and look at that now that I'm just thinking about it. Imagine Curtis Samuel's getting some of those shorter range targets. Once McLaurin starts connecting on these deep balls, he's going to have some big games. One of the reasons why he's a buy is because of these deep balls, because of his 4.3 speed, and he's a discount. The reason why these players are discount is because they're not producing at a higher level. So your basic redraft gamer is not going to covet them. They're not going to vice grip them. So you might be able to snag them in trade on the cheap. The next one is DJ Chark. This guy might be on waivers. He might be on the back end of a roster. Imagine either way, trade, waivers, he's cheap. Wide receiver 63, 15.2 PPR fantasy points. 16.9% target share, 12 targets. Most of his damage came in week 1. 211 air yards, 35% share of the air yards. This guy is like probably going to be our Will Fuller this year. When he hits big. When he doesn't hit, it's not sexy, but he's going to be off and on. Players like that have a role in fantasy football. You chase the matchups with them. Same with Terry McLaurin with his usage. You're chasing the matchups with them. You chase those high over-unders, those sexy spreads. You put them in. You close your eyes. You see what happens. I recommend those players a lot in my rankings videos, but that doesn't mean they're going to be a hit. That means you're chasing for the upside. And Chark's got some upside here. We saw it in week 1. We saw it off and on through the preseason with this team. We saw that golf slinging the rock a little more. So there are some good things. He's going to have some more good games down the line this season. Next wide receiver we're talking about is Brandin Cooks. Currently wide receiver 32. 12.6 PPR fantasy points. Right now in the season. Not sexy. Not sexy at all. But look at the workload here. A 30% target share on 22 targets. 22 targets is a lot. That's 12 targets a game. 204 air yards. 36% share of those air yards. He's going to hit eventually. He's a boring name on your team. But since he's not currently producing, since he's not currently hitting off that volume, he's a guy that you might be able to snag on the cheap. If you're hurting a wide receiver and you have some depth that you can trade or whatever, and you want to get a wide receiver on the cheap that could produce for you, you might want to look at Brandin Cooks. This isn't sexy. He's not going to be a wide receiver 1. He's not going to turn into Jamar Chase overnight. That's not happening. We're not going to find many of those players. But if you're looking for a patch-up job, you got the hole in your wall, and you need to get some putty on that guy, Brandin Cooks might be the guy here for you. You're looking at a guy who's getting a lot of volume. He was productive last season. He's been productive throughout his career. The targets is there for sure. The air yards are there for sure. You may want to look at him and imagine he's going to be somewhat cheap. Basic redraft players, they're not going to be holding on to them tight. Guys who are in the know or in really deep leagues, he might be harder to get because he is getting this workload. When you're in deeper leagues, you're going to pay attention to more of the workload because you're going to be scavenging for players. But Brandin Cooks might be an option for you if you kick the tires. Last guy. And this is more for deeper leagues. This is more if you're really hurting. This isn't a guy I'm telling you to go get. This is a guy on the spreadsheets. The other names on the spreadsheet were like studs or guys that you're not going to be able to really trade for. Marvin Jones was one of the last names on this list, but it's very interesting with this workload. Wide receiver 70 right now. 14.1 PPR points in 2 games, about 7 fantasy points per game right now. 16% target share on 11 targets, 167 air yards, so he's barely meeting these thresholds. Damn near about 30% share of his team's air yards, 334 air yards plus yak. The one thing you want to note about him when you watch the Jaguars play is he is a threat to have a big game on any single week. If you're hurting and you need a wide receiver, this is usually for those guys in deeper leagues, 14-teamers, 16-teamers, deep dynasty leagues. You're hurting, he's on waivers, you may want to think about him, you may want to play the matchups for, but my brain is spinning more for DFS here, for those people who want to play tournaments, those large volume tournaments. If you're putting 60, 70, 100, 150, 200 lineups a week, and you want to make some builds, you're probably going to put in some Marvin Jones in some of those builds to play the matchups to see what happens, especially in those plus matchups somewhere down the line. We'll monitor these spreadsheets. If he keeps popping up with the usage and not getting the points, he's a guy that will pulsate. Players that are popping with usage that are not being productive will eventually be productive as long as they're continuing getting that workload. It eventually happens, especially in those plus matchups. So if Marvin Jones is getting this workload, or even better, he's not producing, you really want to start looking at him. I am not advocating for him really at all, unless you want to take a gamble in DFS, or if you're hurting in deeper leagues. But he is a guy to think about because he is showing some signs there, some signs of life. But those are 5 wide receivers that I'm looking at right now who could be potential trade targets. who could be valued a little bit on the low. Thinking about Chris Olave now, he might be covered a little higher since he's a rookie and is expected to start a little slow, and his workload's being talked about a lot on the internet. But since I'm pointing this out to you, some of you guys are in different leagues and stuff, you may want to kick the tires just to see if you can sneak them. Good stash guy. All these guys are good to stash. All these guys are good to have on your bench because there are some upside, some potential in every single one of them. And just follow the workload, whether it's running backs or receivers, follow the workload. Just know what metrics you need to look at to analyze that workload. But I'm here to help you out. Let me know in the comments who you're trying to get off trades, waivers, or whatever down below. Smash that like button on the way out. Really helps the channel. And also, if you haven't already, hit that subscribe button. I'm trying to help your fantasy teams. I'm at least going to give you some information to keep you entertained and at least keep your brain moving as we get through this long season. I'm at least going to do my best to help you out. That's what I'm going to guarantee. But I want to thank you for watching, and I'll catch you on the next video.